Moderating our conversation today is Ed, my friend, Ed Foster Simeon, who's been here. He's one of the OGs, and he is also the president and CEO of the U.S. Soccer Foundation, whose team wakes up every single morning thinking about how to make soccer more accessible to kids in disadvantaged communities. So, over to you, Ed.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm really thrilled to be here, and thanks for everyone online, and thanks for everyone in the audience for being here today. With this panel today is incredible. We have Cindy Parlow, the president of U.S. Soccer Federation, the governing body of soccer in the United States. We have Gregg Berhalter, the head coach of the U.S. men's national team, and we have Jessica Berman, the commissioner of NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League. Welcome and thank you for joining. Cindy, I'm going to just start with you. A lot of this audience knows the challenges faced by youth sports. Soccer is not immune to those. Cost, transportation, lack of facilities, access, opportunity, particularly as it regards to reaching underrepresented communities. So give us the state of play from your perspective as the leader of U.S. soccer on the state of play of the game right now on the youth side.
All right, well, that's going to take a while. Hopefully those seats are comfortable. But you know, it's a really exciting time to be engaged in soccer right now. You know, our national teams are doing fantastic, Gregg, on the men's side, Vlaco on the women's side. Our pro leagues are thriving and growing, and we'll hear from Jessica, the new commissioner of the NWSL, in a little bit. And the investment and the demand for soccer is at an all-time high right now, and I only see that going up. But as you mentioned, we do have a lot of issues in our game that we need to work to change. I know we've talked a lot about access, but it's also retention, making sure the kids are having fun and doing developmentally appropriate programming. And you know, I know you've all read the stories about the abuse that is taking place in soccer and all of youth sports. So there's a lot of different areas that we need to continue to address to make sure that we're providing fun, safe, developmentally appropriate programming for young kids. And for me, you know, this is a specific passion of mine. I'm not going to rest until I know that every kid that wants to play our game has not only the access to our game, but has the opportunity to succeed in our game. I know we often focus on just giving them access, but it's also about providing them opportunity to be successful in our game. Now I know not everyone's going to play the beautiful stadium like we're in today, so they may not make it to the pro leagues or to play for Gregg on the men's team or Vlaco on the women's team. But I know I am the person today and the leader that I am today because of all the lessons that I learned growing up playing soccer. And so to give those opportunities to every young boy and young girl that wants to do this, wants to be a part of our game, we need to do that. And I challenge everyone to like shift your thinking and think of sport, and I'm in soccer, so specifically soccer, as a birthright. So if we think of it as a birthright, how does that shift our thinking and start attacking the problems of cost, transportation, fields, access, coaches, referees, administrators, what have you, volunteers. So just trying to shift that thinking and making sure that we improve access. And I want to talk about what Don was talking about as well. Like, we have all these challenges, but we have tremendous opportunity. We have a tremendous road ahead of us. We have the 22 Men's World Cup this year, 23 World Cup for the women next year, and then the road to 26 World Cup here in the US, Canada, and Mexico. So I think we can use the momentum and this huge energy moment, because 26 World Cup is going to be the biggest sporting event the world has ever seen. And using that to help increase and address the issues that we're all talking about.
Thanks, Cindy. So I want to follow up quickly on...
Sorry, no follow-ups.
You raised a really important question about the youth space and the opportunity ahead. I know you've invested in some research to try and better understand the challenges. How has that informed your thinking about what we actually need to do? to improve the youth soccer ecosystem?
Yeah, so shortly after I became president, everyone knows that access is a problem, and soccer is largely viewed as a rich white kid sport. And so I wanted to really find out and get data, okay, why is it that way? What are the real issues that are facing our sport, and how do we remove those barriers? And many from the soccer community have participated in this study and donated to have the study done. We're just receiving the results and really analyzing that. But a lot of it comes down to how our sport is viewed, marketing, and how do we shift that thinking from that it's a rich white kid sport to this is a sport that is literally played in every country around the world. And as the most diverse country in the world here in the US, how do we change that focus to making sure that every kid feels welcomed into our game? And so I think that's one of the challenges. The other things that we looked at is just inclusion, in making sure the kids, regardless of their background, regardless if they have a disability or not, regardless of the color of their skin, gender identification, that they feel included and a part of our game. Because our game takes many forms. It's not just 11-a-side. We have power soccer, which is played in wheelchairs. We have a deaf national team. I mean, we have teams for anyone. And so we've got to really improve that. And then for me as well, and I knew this because I'm a youth soccer coach as well, is it's got to be fun. Ed and I have talked about this a lot. We have the soccer pyramid, and a lot of it focuses moving up that pyramid or get out. So if you're not moving up to the next highest team, then the next highest team, then it's time to move out. But we need to change that focus and bring the fun back to the game and make sure that this is for every kid, regardless of the level of play. Find the level that you can compete at and have fun at, and stay at that level. That's fine, and just enjoy our game. And so bringing the fun back into the game, I think, is a huge thing that we saw in the study that we're missing the mark on.
Gregg, I want to shift to you. You are, as Tom mentioned, you're getting ready to take an incredibly diverse team to compete in the World Cup in Qatar. That wasn't always the case with the U.S. men's national team over the years. What happened? What actions were taken? What transformed that allowed increased participation by diverse groups on this national team?
So about 14 years ago, U.S. Soccer, together with Major League Soccer, started the Development Academy. And what that did was provide opportunities, scholarships for players to play in the elite competition. What we saw was an increased level of scouting. So these MLS clubs, and I was part of an MLS club, we actually went into underserved communities looking for players, wanting to bring them into our academies at young ages. And you're seeing the fruits of that now with our team, being an incredibly diverse team and an absolute joy to be around when you see all these different backgrounds coming together. So I think part of it was scouting, part of it was scholarships, and then finally, having standards of what coaching needs to look like, what the structure needs to look like to ensure that there's a pathway from a player to make it from our youth academy all the way up to the pro team.
As a former MLS coach, one of the elements of that was that the academies are offered, kids don't pay to participate in the academy if they have the talent, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what difference that has made?
Well, that's a huge difference, but in terms of the amount of players we're affecting, it's still only the elite players. And what we need to do as MLS clubs, as part of U.S. Soccer, is how do we expand that? How do we get into underserved communities and give players the opportunity to play with standards that gets them excited about the game, like Cindy was talking about, but also a pathway to excel in the game. And I think that's something that needs to happen as well. But MLS clubs do provide scholarships. The players come in free of charge. Everything's taken care of, and they're put in position to eventually make it to the pro level.
Right. Jessica, you're in an interesting position. when you worked with the NHL, you were exclusively focused on creating access and opportunity, increasing participation. Now you're running the business as the commissioner of NWSL. How do you bring that experience and knowledge? What role does the league play in the youth space? How does that work?
It's a great question, Ed. Before I answer you, I just want to thank Aspen Institute, DC United, Audi Field for allowing for the Washington Spirit to play their semifinal game here tonight. I hope you all are going to stay and cheer. Thank you. Really a wonderful demonstration of how we can collaborate and partner to create a 1 + 1 = 3 outcome. So hugely important to the success of our league are those partnerships. To answer your question, Ed, I spent my last 4 years at the NHL exclusively reimagining the role of a professional sports league as it relates to youth development, both for player pipeline as well as fan development. And through that experience, probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my entire career was the creation of the Declaration of Principles. If you haven't heard of it, I encourage you to look it up. It still is a living, breathing initiative at the NHL where all of the stakeholders in the hockey community coalesced around a set of principles of what we expect our sport to be, what we aspire to, and what we are, and how we wish to show up, to hold ourselves accountable, and to allow for our stakeholders to hold organizations accountable. The sort of next iteration of that is the Children's Bill of Rights, which the NWSL is really proud to support, and has really sort of transcended a single sport model and really rethinking what we can offer to children and families through sport. So the role of the NWSL, what is the role of a professional sports league? Well, number one, it's to provide an opportunity that frames for children, if I can see it, I can be it. And we all know how important that is in virtually all industries, but especially for little girls, to be able to know that not just through Title IX that they can aspire to play in college, and that is actually a legitimate, authentic, real opportunity for girls, but also to be able to play professionally, domestically in our country. And I think the opportunity is so ripe given how amazing the U.S. women's national team is, and that we have an opportunity to really capitalize on the fact that the best players in the world are actually right here on our soil. Mm-hmm. And so I think for the league, that allows for us to really think about our role in cultivating and continuing the player pipeline to ensure that the best players are here, homegrown in our country. And we start from a place of strength, which is a great place to start, but we can't be complacent. And so looking forward to working with Cindy and everyone at US Soccer, because I think it's a joint responsibility to make sure that we continue to prioritize that. But then also thinking about the role of participation as it relates to fandom. From a business perspective, we know that when kids play sports, they become fans of that sport. And that's the future of the NWSL. That's our next generation of fans. And so making sure that we have connectivity within the ecosystem of youth sports for programs that allow for both boys and girls to see women performing on the pitch at the highest level in this country.
So just to follow up on that, so does that suggest that a league has a responsibility not only to invest in elite player development, but also to invest in the broader youth sports ecosystem?
Yeah, I would argue that's actually our primary responsibility. I think we were just talking about this actually, Greg and I think we have a supporting or secondary responsibility in partnership with US Soccer to support elite participation. But I also think it's equally important to think about the role of the foundation of the pipeline, because I think, again, we share that responsibility in terms of the growth of grassroots, but how do we ensure that we are leaning into our diversity superpower. I love that Tom said that in his opening, but you don't have a superpower unless you claim it. So we actually have to claim that superpower with intentionality and ensure that anyone feels like they can play and thrive and have opportunity to feel welcome, feel successful, and extract from their experience all of the teachable moments and life lessons that we all know you get from playing sports. And if you get an elite player out of that pool, then that's great. But really, we all know that the reason, the value proposition of playing sports has to be more than that, because less than 1% end up transcending into the elite space. And so it's not a good investment if that's your only value proposition. The investment has to be for the value proposition that's available to anyone who plays sports, which is really about learning teamwork and dedication and hard work and discipline and all the things that we know the sport of soccer offers.
So, which brings us to the hard question, because not every child has access and opportunity to participate. And in youth soccer, the travel soccer, the expense of playing at soccer, this whole idea of up or out, either you make it to the travel team and spend a lot of money, or why bother playing? What is the responsibility of U.S. Soccer and the leagues and the national team and others in how do we change that dynamic so that more kids have access and the ability to participate? Because everything that Commissioner Berman just shared is true, that less than 1% will make it to the top of the pyramid, but everyone can get this benefit. But it's challenging because we have an ecosystem that it's a free market society. It's a business now. It's a $19 billion business, youth sports. How do we change the dynamic to make it more accessible for more children?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I would love to hear more from the other panelists. But I think Jessica brings up a great point, and is that it's all of us working together. U.S. Soccer can't do it alone, MLS can't do it alone, NWSL can't do it alone. So it's all of us working together, from the pro leagues to U.S. Soccer, to the nonprofit organizations like U.S. Soccer Foundation, to the members of U.S. Soccer, whether it's State Association, U.S. Club, AYSO, your Parks and Recs, YMCA, just engaging with everyone to figure out how do we collectively work together to address these issues. And one of the things that I think is coming out of the study that I'm really interested in is bringing soccer to the schools. Instead of requiring the kids to go to soccer, because we know transportation is a problem and cost is a problem. So how do we bring soccer to the kids? And so you're increasing exposure right there. Access is easier. There's still a cost, but it's a smaller cost. And so how do we all work together to create these programs, implement these programs, run them, and make sure that they're sustainable for a long period of time? And these programs can take a lot of different looks. It can be in a PE class, an after-school program, what have you. I think that's one area that we all collectively need to work on, because I do think the top of the pyramid is looking pretty good right now, and it's really that base that I'm concerned about. And Jessica brought up another good point is the value proposition can't just be about making it to Gregg's team or making it into the NWSL and the professional leagues. You know, it's really interesting, and I know there's people in the audience here that are a part of different businesses, but when you're looking to hire, many of the businesses are looking to hire athletes because they know that people that have competed on teams know how to work in the business world. They're team players. They know how to work together towards a common goal. They have persistence and resilience and all those life lessons that we all grew up learning through sports. And so I think there's a lot to be said, a lot that the sport can offer, and not just soccer, other sports as well, but obviously our focus up here is soccer, to help provide a future for kids in every community across the country.
Gregg, you've had the opportunity to live in Germany. I believe your family lived in Germany with you. What did you learn abroad that could inform our thinking here? What are they doing that we should be doing, if anything, or is it not comparable?
Well, I think in Germany and in Europe, by and large, it starts really local. Every town has their club, and the kids start off playing in that club, and as they continue to improve and get better, now they've joined a youth professional team, but it really starts locally. And I think in the United States in particular, the two things, to Cindy's point, is the first thing is we need to be intentional about how we're spreading the game and how we're going into underserved communities and giving them a soccer experience. And then the second thing that we need to do is have standards, and have standards at the lowest level, that the kids can count on a coach that's going to understand what youth soccer is, and is going to give them an exciting experience that they want to continue on in the game. And then lastly, I think the other really important thing is common sense, right? Do we need 10-year-olds traveling, 8 hours for a game on the weekend? That doesn't pass the common sense test. It's not that difficult, right? Let's keep them playing local, keep them competing here, maybe have some restructuring, and then as they get older, then they can start traveling more.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you raised about why do we do that, 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds traveling, crazy distances to participate. But there's an incentive in the model because tournaments make money, other people make money, et cetera, and identifying yourself as the best coach or the best team has a value to that. What can U.S. Soccer do as the governing body to, I'm not going to say legislate, but to influence or incentivize a different kind of approach at the youth level?
Yeah, and I think it requires a lot of collaboration. For those of you that aren't in soccer, we have a lot of different youth organizations that do different tournaments and leagues, and we kind of call it the alphabet soup of youth soccer because they all have their own acronyms. And this is already starting. It's bringing those groups together and trying to think and coming up with some like best practices just for the good of the game, for the future of the kids in the game, and coming up with ways, okay, why is this U10 team traveling 4 hours on the weekend to play games when they just drove past 100 teams that they could have played that would have been competitive against them? So I think there's that collaboration that needs to happen, and it is finally starting to happen within our youth organizations. And I think it's coming up with these common sense principles. And for me, the money in youth soccer is mostly at the elite level of the game, which is taking away the focus from where I really think it should be, is that entry level into the game, so that U10 and under age groups, and really making sure that those kids are coming into the game and have a positive experience, have fun with the game, are learning the skills, both soccer skills and life skills that we know are important, so that they are enjoying the games. They become fans of the game. They go on to maybe be pros in soccer, or they go on to a C-suite executive. There's a lot of jobs in sports that aren't necessarily on the field. We have engineers, we have financial people, we have advertising, marketing. Like, there's so many jobs, and so just giving the kids the opportunity to grow up through this game and to provide those opportunities to them. So I think, getting back to your original question, I think it's a lot of collaboration, because there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, but can we work together to do things that will pass the common sense test, as Gregg said?
Jessica, you're working in NHL. What actionable things did you deploy there that when you look at the youth soccer landscape that you think are transferable? Is there anything specific that you would say, you know what, we should think about this, or we should do that?
Yeah, a few things. Number one, I just sort of validate your point, Cindy, that we can't put the genie back in the bottle. I think we have to recognize that America is a capitalist society, and so if there are gaps in the marketplace, entrepreneurs will find those gaps, and they will seek to monetize those gaps. And second point, focusing on who is the audience. So I completely agree with the idea of listening to the children about their experience, but I think we also need in this country to think about who is the consumer. Most businesses in corporate America base their business model around the consumer. In this country and in youth sports, the parents are the consumer, but the parents are largely marginalized in the process of bringing them on board as a stakeholder who need to be part of the solution. If the outcome that we're seeking, for better or worse, is we're trying to compete on an international level, right? Like that's why the craziness is happening. That's why everyone's traveling all over the country. We're trying to compete internationally from a talent perspective. But the end product is actually not achieving that objective. Other countries' models work better than our model does. So the model is broken and everybody is chasing a dream down a path that actually is proven to not work. So I believe not just common sense will prevail, but looking at the case studies around who is successful. If the idea is that this whole elite professionalization of youth sports has been built to create the best possible athletes, we all know that that's actually not the best way. Why? Because kids aren't having fun, because families can't afford it, because kids are quitting because they're getting injured when they're 12. And so, you know, we look at the studies around Norway, and relative to their population, they have more elite athletes in their population by a lot relative to this country. So, and their whole model is based on a local model. And so rethinking, reshaping, okay, what's the end goal that we're looking for, and really finding a way to lean into those who are delivering the experience about what are we trying to achieve, and building a system in partnership with them that actually accommodates what maybe they're trying to achieve and how they're trying to monetize this area. And a lot of what we did at the NHL was stakeholder management and relationship building, and really bringing in to the conversation those private organizations who sort of let the system get away from them, and helping to give them a seat at the table, to have them be part of the solution, because at the end of the day, those organizations, they do care about the future of youth sports, and I think there is a way for them to achieve their stated objectives and for us to achieve our stated objectives. We just have to work collaboratively to ensure that we're being intentional about what systems we're putting in place and what their both intended and unintended consequences are.
Okay. So I want to shift into a little bit of future. 2026, we're going to host the World Cup here for the first time since 1994. Someone did an analysis. The World Cup comes to your country maybe once every 30, 35 years or so. That's a long time. So it's a huge opportunity to build interest in the sport, grow the game, but how are we going to accomplish that in the context of what we're talking about here? How are we going to use 2026, the arrival of 2026, or the pathway there, to increase participation in underserved communities, to create access, to drop some of the barriers that are in the way of the base of the pyramid participating and having a good time in the process?
You asking me? Okay.
Yes. I'm asking
I
the
couldn't
whole
tell who you
panel.
were looking at.
I want everyone on the panel to kind of respond to that question,
Yeah.
because this opportunity is one we can't squander.
No, I agree. And Ed, you and I have had many conversations on this topic. And it's kind of like what I've talked about before, right? So it's about U.S. Soccer working with all of our members and all of our stakeholders to really ride this wave and make sure that we are capitalizing on the road to 26, the actual event of 26, and then post 26, the legacy portion of it. And so I think the investment in soccer in this country as we have the road to 26 is going to only increase. And so as those funds come in and working with our different members at the youth level, the adult level, and the professional level, working with them to fund programs in schools. So like I was talking about earlier, bringing soccer to the kids in the inner cities and making sure that, working with the different groups, because what works here in DC may not work in New York and is probably different in Austin, Texas. So, so just working, because we're really lucky we have members in every state. And so working with each individual member to figure out, okay, how do we capitalize on this moment in your area and really improve access to our game?
What would success look like from your perspective, Greg? I mean, from where you
Yeah,
sit, what do you think needs
It's
to
a great question. And for me, it's about creating heroes. The team has the opportunity to do that with their performance. I remember when the World Cup was in the United States in 1994, and I can rattle off the names of the players that were in that World Cup and that played. They became my heroes. When I talk to our team, that diverse group of players that we have about their most memorable experience with the World Cup, first thing that comes to mind to them is Landon Donovan's goal against Algeria in the 2010 World Cup. So the 2026 World Cup is an opportunity for us to inspire a nation, but inspire individuals, and in particular underserved communities, because our team represents them.
Mm-hmm. At dinner last night, Jessica, someone made the point that we talk about pay to play, but somebody's got to pay, right? For the equipment, for the time, for the field, for the space, and all those things. Are soccer sponsors, or corporations, et cetera, do they see the value in investing? You talk about the fan base, et cetera, and growing that. Is there a willingness or understanding of the importance of this operating at the base as opposed to the signboards in the stadium? Do you see an opportunity there in the road to 2026?
Yeah, and I actually, I do think there is an opportunity, and even though the NWSL is only 10 years old, about half of our teams are actually building out academies to really invest in youth soccer for all of these reasons. And I expect for that to grow for many reasons. And your point about sort of the commercial side is one of those reasons. I know from experience at the NHL that sponsors are actually looking to reach families. That is the demographic that sponsors are looking to reach. And we know that those families over-index on engagement when they're fully immersed in the sport. And so there's a huge value proposition from a business perspective as well to be able to build that audience that allows for engagement with a team or the league's corporate partners as well, that I believe will feed incremental investment.
Cindy, what does that look like from where you sit at U.S. Soccer?
Yeah, I would agree exactly with what Jessica is saying, and we're already seeing it. So U.S. Soccer, we brought all of our commercial rights back in-house, and so that will start in 23, and we're already seeing with sponsorship renewals coming up, the real interest in investing in the youth game. And so, and it's exactly for the reason, all the right reasons like that we all care about: access, retention, and growing kids, but it also makes business sense to these companies because, I'll use a Nike, for example, who has been a tremendous sponsor of U.S. Soccer for a long time, is they're really interested in not just the elite level of the game, which they're investing in right now, but growing the game at all levels for all kids. One, because it's the right thing to do, But two, it makes business sense for them. You know, I have a 4.5-year-old, and he already knows what Nikes are and swooshes, and he's looking for swooshes all the time and pointing them out to me. So there's also that brand awareness and brand identity that happens at young ages, as we all know. So we're seeing more and more of it, and I think companies more and more are seeing not only the right thing to do to invest in youth sports, but the business opportunity as well.
So we have about a couple of minutes left, I think, in this panel. I'm going to ask a larger question. Youth soccer and then youth sports writ large represents millions of households, millions of families across the country. Yet we talk about shortages of fields and lack of field space. Are we doing a good enough job as youth sports of conveying to policymakers, legislators, the importance of investing in the kinds of infrastructure that's required at the local and neighborhood level for kids to have the opportunities to participate?
I can touch on that. I think the short answer is no. I think it's getting better, but we do, as a country, and speaking more about youth sports in general and not just soccer, depend on local municipalities to invest and have a vision for youth sports in their communities. And so whether that's a new development having to set aside space for fields or a gymnasium or what have you. So I think it's all of us together, all of us up on the stage, as well as you in the audience, to really communicate with your municipalities, the government entities, in making sure in their community planning that they're making sure that fields are being built and common places for kids to come and play and to have access to the various sports is really important.
But it's not just the building of the fields. It has to be accessible to everyone, not just those who can pay for the permit, correct? Yes?
Correct.
Yeah,
Clearly there's a more active role for public-private partnerships to increase access and opportunity in programming. But to the extent there's a gap, you're going to see, as we were just discussing, the private sector stepping in. And I'm really proud of what some of our NWSL owners are doing. Kansas City right now is building a training facility that's going to have access to fields for the entire community and building out programming for kids to be able to play sports. That's going to help with the player pipeline. That's going to provide access for healthy living and teaching kids all the values that youth sports teaches, and it's going to build their next generation of fans. So it's like the do good, do well model, and it makes so much sense from a business perspective, and it's the right thing to do. So I think you're going to see more and more of that because the gap exists, and yes, we want to move mountains and get the public sector more involved in solving for these social challenges because they are real, as we know. But to the extent those gaps continue to exist, you're going to see the private sector stepped in and solve for those problems.
Great. Greg, you wanted to jump in there, I thought.
No, I was just going to say that it's also looking at existing communities and saying, okay, how can we repurpose space and make fields that kids are able to play, all sports, not just soccer.
Well, I think we're out of time, and so I thank you, Cindy, Greg, Jessica. Really good discussion. Thank you for making yourself available today to participate, and thank you to the audience here in person and online. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Ed.
you, Ed.